Welcome to Security Speakeasy Show, where we talk all things network security. Today, we're going to talk about proof of concepts. And we know that every customer's network is unique. So they have different needs when it comes to network security. And a proof of concept is an important way for them to get an understanding of actual performance of a firewall in their unique environment that is suitable for their needs. So let's dive right into it on why it's important to take a test drive. My name is Mohit, and I'm on the marketing team at Palo Networks. And joining me today is Marcel Hoffman. Thanks, Marcel, for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Marcel, you're a senior technical marketing manager at Palo Networks, and you've been here for almost 5 years. Last time we talked about why it's important to look beyond a firewall data sheet and actually dive a little bit deeper into it, because sometimes they can be misleading. Today, we're going to talk about proof of concept and why it's important to take a test drive of the firewall. So let me get started with the first question. So why is it important to take a proof of concept?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Why do you want to do a proof of concept? And the reason is that the data sheets, the white papers, all the things that the vendor gives you about their product is just one side of the story, right? It doesn't tell you how this product will actually perform in your specific environment. All data sheets are done in a lab. They are trying to emulate real world scenarios, but to be honest, only your environment is the one that you want to test it in. And it also gives you some intangible insights into the product, like how easy it is to use, how easy it is to configure. And also one thing that we notice in POCs when we support customers doing them is, and what they come back to us is, they get a lot of the gotchas during the POC phase already. So there are some vendors out there that sell a firewall that for certain features requires helper products. So they might not be talking about that in the beginning of the sales process because they maybe don't even know that you have this requirement. And so if you would decide to go with that vendor and you want to enable feature X, Y, and Z, and you realize, or they come back to you and say, hey, by the way, if you want to use that, you need this other box. I need this virtual machine. And then we integrate it together, and then you can use the feature. These are so like gotchas that you normally don't get from just reading data sheets. And they can be potentially very expensive to fix down the line, right? Because you have to go back to your boss and say, hey, the PO, right, that we just got approved, maybe we need a second PO to buy some of these helper products or helper subscriptions to get it to do what we wanted it to do. So that's also something where a POC gives you that these insights before you run into them later in the deployment phase. The other thing is it's your first time you touch the product, right? You can use it. You can touch everything. You can configure it. You can see what the look and feel is, how easy or difficult it is to set up. All things that you can't really capture in static documents.
Yeah, going back to the car example, right? Like you can't really just take a look at a car face value and just buy it. You obviously go in, get yourself a test drive, and same thing when it comes to firewalls. It's really important to, I guess, sit in the driver's seat and then get a test drive of the actual product, right? So when you actually go and get, your proof of concept or your test drive in this sense, like what do I need to take into consideration, or just anyone needs to take into consideration overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great analogy, right? And if you take the test drive, what you should not do is just validate the specs, right? Also, that's the top speed of the car, and then you're like punching it and see if you can reach the top speed, right? I mean, the poor sales guy will probably also not appreciate if you do that. Yeah. So it's more about success criteria. What are really the features that you want to test? And one important thing, and that's often customer doing this, is they test one feature by itself. So basically feature by feature. And that is a problem because in your environment, you will never run a next generation firewall just with that one feature in mind. You don't want to just test now let's test the IPS functionality. Now let's test the antivirus. Now let's test the sandbox. It all works in concert on a next generation firewall. So whatever you do, whatever you test, make sure all the features, all the security features that you want are enabled. There are some vendors out there that like to do it one by one, because then you don't see the complete picture of what it would look like, especially performance-wise, when everything is turned on, because they don't have a single pass parallel processing architecture that would help them run this at speed.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that's very important. The other advice that I have is, as a customer, you should always make sure that the vendors are not trying to, make them look in the best light by doing some interesting tactics. So we have seen some vendors bringing their own test equipment. That's not really necessary, right? If you're doing a POC, you should have your own test equipment. Or they bring in firewalls with custom firmware, specifically modified to be able to withstand these tests. Or they even bring like 3 or 4 engineers, right, to help you with the POC. But the question is, once the POC is done, these 3 or 4 engineers, they go home. Mm-hmm. They're not with you anymore. That should be a red flag. If I need 3, 4 highly specialized engineers to configure even just a simple POC, that is a red flag in itself. Mm-hmm. Again, something that your data sheets don't tell you. That's why you need to do the test drive.
So Marcel, going on to my next topic, oftentimes customers tell me that they don't have the time, nor do they have the resources for a proof of concept. So how do they go about getting over this hump so they can actually get their hands on a firewall and take that test drive?
Yeah, that's a good point. We unfortunately hear that often from customers, that they don't have the time or the resources to pull off a POC. My personal opinion on that is you should always take the time for a proof of concept, right? You will not be happy if you buy a car unseen just based on data sheet, right? And you will say, if I would only have taken the time, to do the test drive. Often we also see that customers are overthinking proof of concepts, right? They don't have to be time consuming or very long. As long as you decide on success criteria with all the vendors, it's possible to get a POC done in really short amount of time. We had POCs with 200 criteria that were done in just 4 weeks. It's possible, as long as you spend some time on planning this. It can be done fairly quickly. You can also just do another thing with the firewalls nowadays. They can all run in tap mode. So just take an eval unit, put it into your environment behind your existing security stack, and just let it do its job in a passive tap mode. That way, the firewall tells you what it would have done, or what it would have prevented if it would be inline, and you can take a look at the results. You can even see what your existing security stack is missing. If you want, you can also put it in front of the security stack to see if it can cope with the amount of incoming traffic. All of that doesn't require a lot of preparation, and it allows you still to experience the product, see what it looks like with your traffic mix in your environment, and that is really not a lot of work involved. If even that is not an option, in that case, I would recommend to take an ultimate test drive. That is something that you can do for most of our products. Go to our website, search for ultimate test drive, and you will see the ones that you can take. They are 2 to 3 hours long, and they are guided steps through a real-world scenario where we guide you through the process, what it would look like to deploy, configure, and manage the firewall in this specific use case. It's done on a real firewall with, you see everything that you would have in a production environment, and you can leverage that to gain some insights on what the product would feel like and look like on a day-to-day basis, right, as a firewall administrator. Mm-hmm. So that's an easy and convenient way to get at least some experience. It's not a complete replacement for a real POC, but it at least gives you an idea, and maybe you have some gotchas already there where you say, hey, this is much easier with this vendor than it is with that vendor. So at least it's an option that you should leverage. And one more thing that is also important is And it's the same when you test drive a real car. You want to be in the driver's seat. That is very important. Don't let the vendor fool you, and they only show you like the pretty parts of the car, right? They show you the, look, it has a big engine, right? And look, it has, all these nice gizmos in the cockpit. And then at some point you realize, that there are huge issues like a taillight is falling off, a wheel is falling off, right? So you should always be in the driver's seat. You are the one that runs this, and you should be the one that says what's happening, right? You don't want them to lead you to conclusions, because normally that is, they show you the strength and don't show you the weaknesses, right? I mean, that only makes sense. Mm-hmm. But in the end, you're the one that's buying the product. You're the one that has to live with it day in and day out. So you should also be the one that tests it the way you want.
Well, thanks, Marcel, for walking me through why it's important to get a POC and why it's important for me to sit in the driver's seat when I actually go and get my hands on a eval unit of a firewall, or just even the virtual unit to test out. And thank you all for showing up today. If you like today's episode, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment, and visit PaloAltoNetworks.com for more information. Also, check out the description below for more information on where you can find out the details to get your own ultimate test drive. And see you all in the next episode.